My parents skipped my wedding for my sister's beach trip. Months later, they begged me to attend my sister's, and I said, not this time. I'm 32 years old and I recently got engaged to my girlfriend, Olivia, who is 28 years old. We've been dating for 5 years, and no one was surprised when I proposed. Our family's new marriage was on the way, and everyone appeared pleased for us. My parents congratulated us. My younger sister, Madison, 27, was thrilled, and my oldest brother, Ethan, 36, stated he was looking forward to the big day. Everything appeared okay at first. Olivia and I agreed on our wedding date rather fast. It was not arbitrary. We chose the anniversary of the day we met. That day had always held particular meaning for us, and getting married on it seemed natural. We nailed it down, reserved the venue, and began planning. At first my family seemed to agree. My mother inquired about colors and themes. My father joked about making a famous wedding speech, and Madison and Ethan inquired as to where it would take place. Nothing seemed amiss. A few weeks later, my mom gently noted that the date might not be suitable for everyone. Madison was ambiguous at first, but she quickly clarified that she had a conflicting vacation, and Ethan mentioned his corporate retreat. The reasons kept stacking up, making it appear like our wedding was an afterthought. I brushed it off, figuring it was nothing significant, until Madison made it apparent that she was unhappy with it. She informed me that our wedding was set for the week of her annual ladies' vacation, which she and her friends had been doing for many years. She responded as if this was a life or death situation, stating it was awful timing and she didn't want to pick between her vacation and my wedding. Olivia and I were confused. Our wedding date had been set for months. Madison's trip was something she and her pals might organize at any moment. It was neither a job duty nor a family emergency. It was a vacation. I informed her that she was, of course, invited to the wedding, but we were not changing the date. That's when my mother started pressing. She advised me to explore a compromise, because Madison should not have to miss anything essential to her. I said that our wedding wasn't simply essential to us. It was one of the most important days of our life. Instead of backing down, my mother doubled down, behaving as if I was being difficult by not making concessions. Then Ethan joined in. He said that my wedding was on the same weekend as his company's large yearly retreat. Apparently, he went every year for networking and team development. He wasn't overtly asking that we change the date, but he did make it apparent that he'd have a difficult decision to make. At this point, it felt like my family was treating our wedding as an optional occasion, something they'd go to if it was convenient. My father remained fairly silent but eventually stated, "A lot is going on that time of year," as if it justified their views. Olivia was astonished. She'd always gotten along well with my family, and she never expected such a strong reaction to something as basic as a wedding date. She inquired whether my family had always been like Qley, prioritizing their own convenience before showing up for me. Looking back, I noticed that they had a pattern for doing this. They constantly expected things to revolve around them. My mother offered another solution, proposing we postpone. She kept presenting it as if we were being inflexible, when in fact we were the ones being instructed to rearrange things for everyone else. At this time, I'd had enough. I informed them that the date was final. We were not going to postpone just because Madison wanted to drink drinks on the beach or Ethan had a business function. We gave everyone plenty of warning, and they were welcome to come if they wanted, but we weren't going to adjust our plans to fit their schedule. Madison did not take it well. She went on to say that I was being selfish and that family should come first. I reminded her that this was my wedding, not just any family meal. If she truly wanted to be there, she could forego a vacation for once in her life. The situation began to worsen. A cousin contacted me, informing me that my family was discussing how difficult I was acting. It seemed as if they'd altered history. They weren't the only ones who failed to prioritize my wedding. I was the one making things tough by expecting them to be there. Some people supported me, while others claimed I was generating unneeded controversy. Olivia warned me not to let it get to me, and she was correct. We were pleased with our decision, and we were not going to let this foolishness dampen our enthusiasm. Then I issued them a final warning. The date was established, we were not going to change it. If they wanted to be there, that's terrific. If not, it was their decision. But I wasn't going to continue entertaining this debate. Madison and my mother refused to accept this and continued to push. That's when I knew it wasn't simply about scheduling issues. This was about control. My family was used to my bending over backward for them, and they didn't like that I was standing firm. Fine. If they didn't want to come, that was their decision. But I was not about to urge them to attend my wedding. Madison did not let it go. She resumed messaging the day after I made it plain that the date would not change. There was no dispute this time, just one guilt trip after another. She went on to say that she had been looking forward to her yearly trip for months, that she had already paid for everything, and that it was unfair that she had to pick between a vacation and her own brother's wedding. Every few hours, another message would appear. She wasn't begging me to modify the date anymore. She acted as if I had harmed her by not doing it. Then my mother stepped in. Initially, the messages were not straightforward. They were subtle and almost casual. Things like, "Family should always come first," and "You'll understand when you have kids someday." However, it didn't take long for her to shed the act and get to the point. She believed I was obstinate, and she was quite unhappy that I refused to be flexible. Apparently, Madison was not the only one who had a problem. She began describing additional family members who were furious. No names, no specifics, just generic statements about how many people believe you don't care about your own family. Ethan stopped responding completely. There are no texts, phone calls, or anything. Until now, he hadn't been as outspoken as Madison, but it was clear he had picked a side. I wrote him a couple of texts regarding wedding plans, not about the turmoil, and received no response. He'd decided his business event was more important, and that was it. Then my father finally spoke out. I expected him to support me, but instead he paused before adding that he and my mother were debating attending. Instead of making a solid decision, he pretended that skipping my wedding was an unintended consequence of family difficulties. He attempted to soften it by adding something about how they didn't want any stress on our wedding day, but the message remained obvious. They were upset that I was refusing to give in, and they were considering skipping their own son's wedding because of it. Olivia's parents, on the other hand, could not believe what was going on. They had been watching things unfold, and when they found out that my parents may not attend the wedding, they were done being nice. They repeatedly reassured us that we were not in the wrong, and that no matter what my family did, they would totally back us. Olivia and I agreed we wouldn't wait for my family to approve of our decisions. The wedding was still occurring, and we were looking forward to organizing it. We began refining arrangements, organizing events, and planning a day that would be exciting regardless of who showed up. That's when the family began dividing into teams. Some of my relatives, aunts and uncles, contacted me, either to congratulate us or to confirm their attendance. But some were plainly standing with my parents and Madison. I learned via the grapevine that my mother and Madison had complained to everyone about how cruel I was being. They said that by refusing to compromise, I was causing problems. Then the Facebook post occurred. My mother never addressed me personally, but it was clear who it was about. A long passive-aggressive post about how some people forget the value of family and how it's a shame when selfish actions tear loved ones apart. The remarks were equally as awful. A slew of relatives joined in, all ambiguous but unequivocally agreeing with her. Olivia did not even blink. She just instructed me not to reply. She saw it for what it was, an attempt to lure me into further drama, and she was correct. If I got involved, it would develop into a huge disaster. Instead of being caught into it, I carried out the strategy we had all along. We sent out wedding invites. We included my relatives and made it obvious that they were still welcome. That's when Madison and Ethan made things official. Both declined. They didn't call or explain. They simply mailed in their RSVPs with a solid no. My parents, on the other hand, remained unclear. They didn't explicitly decline, but they also didn't confirm. They were still hoping I would alter my mind. Then a cousin let me know. My mother and Madison made it plain they were unhappy with the wedding date, but I didn't anticipate them to start discreetly discourage family people from coming. They did not explicitly urge a boycott, but their continual hostility was enough to make some families wary. That was it, my breaking point. I was tired of trying to appease individuals who obviously did not care about me. I wasn't going to keep begging my own relatives to show up. Olivia and I sat down, looked at each other, and made our decision. We were not going to waste another second on them. Whether or not my family attended, the wedding was going to be fantastic. And when the honeymoon arrived, we left without telling them anything. The wedding day has arrived. I awoke early, looking at the ceiling for a few seconds before it all became clear. It eventually happened. After months of planning, tension, and turmoil, today was finally the day. Olivia was already up, getting dressed in another room with her bridesmaids. The home was abuzz with enthusiasm. Her family had been up since daybreak, ensuring that everything was flawless. Then my phone vibrated. A cousin texted. "Just so you know, your parents, Madison and Ethan, aren't coming." There was no reason. No last-minute changes of heart. Just confirmation of what I expected. I put down my phone and got dressed. The outfit fitted well. Everything was in place. Outside, Olivia's parents were making sure the automobiles came on time, greeting visitors and playing nice music in the background. It was evident that they had moved up. They weren't treating it like any other wedding. They treated it as if it were their son's wedding, not their daughter's. The ceremony was amazing. The venue was crowded with the exception of the vacant seats reserved for my parents, Madison and Ethan. I'd prepared for it, but seeing those empty chairs was something else. Olivia's father led her down the aisle. Her mother was already in tears, and her brother stood alongside her with pride. My side of the family had a few cousins, some aunts and uncles who hadn't bought into my mother's foolishness, and my favorite aunt, Aunt Diane. That was the greatest surprise of the day. I hadn't expected her to arrive, but just as the ceremony began, she snuck into one of the chairs. Later, she drew me aside and shook her head. "I don't care what your mom says. You're my nephew, and I wasn't going to miss this." Olivia and I exchanged vows. The officiant proclaimed us husband and wife, and that was it. No more tension. No more waiting. As soon as we kissed, the entire audience burst out in shouts. The roar of applause, laughter and enthusiasm drowned away any thoughts I had for my family. Next came the reception. Olivia's family greeted us with love and attention from the moment we came inside. Toasts were made, glasses clinked, and the meal was delicious. Every time I looked around, one of Olivia's family was checking in, ensuring our happiness, and making the day more memorable. My family's attempt to make this wedding feel hollow by not attending failed. Halfway through the night, I was handed an envelope. It came from my parents. Inside was a check and a letter reading, "We hope you learn the value of family someday." I folded the note and slid it into my pocket without saying anything. The check went directly into my jacket, unread. Olivia caught on right away. She gripped my hand beneath the table and continued the talk as if nothing had occurred. We danced, joked and snapped pictures. Nothing was going to ruin the night. The photos and videos then began to spread. Guests commented on how wonderful everything looked. A few relatives even mentioned, wishing my parents had been present. Hours later, Madison expressed her thoughts in a cryptic Instagram story. "Some people don't value family traditions." It wasn't surprising, but it was upsetting to see her double down rather than ponder. There were no names or blatant calls out, but she didn't need to. The timing screamed everything. The next morning, I received another note. This time, it's a voicemail. My mom. It was too lengthy. She wasn't shouting, but her tone was the same as when she wanted me to know I was in the wrong. She talked about how the family was coming apart, how I had pushed them away, and how Madison and Ethan were devastated. She used comments like, "After everything we've done for you, I never thought my own son would do this." Then my father sent an SMS. I regretted how things turned out. However, when I inquired if he had tried to persuade Mom or Madison to rethink, he skirted the topic. His remorse was not over what had transpired. It was about the implications of being silent. Olivia watched me read it, and then rolled her eyes. "Our wedding was beautiful. Don't let them rewrite it." She was correct. We were not going to let the guilt trips pull us back in. We packed our luggage and headed for our honeymoon without informing anyone where we were going. The honeymoon was ideal, no worry, no drama, just me and Olivia, isolated from everything. We had chosen a lovely resort with white sand beaches, limitless beverages, and a sense of calm that made it easy to forget the bustle leading up to the wedding. For the first several days, we kept our phones turned off. No texts, calls, or interruptions. But drama does not take a vacation. I got on my phone one morning and was instantly inundated with missed calls, unread texts, and notifications from the family group chat. At first, I ignored them. Then Olivia's phone also lighted up. My mother, sister, and even Ethan, all called and texted. Something occurred. I opened the group chat, and it was complete mayhem. My mother was in complete meltdown mode, shouting out the family members who had attended the wedding. She said they had betrayed the family by turning there to support me and Olivia. She wasn't only upset. They were called out by name, accused of encouraging rudeness and taking sides. Aunt Diane, who had shocked me by arriving, was the first target. My mother had sent a lengthy, dramatic letter about how, I guess loyalty doesn't mean much these days, and how some people are too easily persuaded. Madison jumped in to back her up. She wasn't even attempting to conceal her displeasure. She was personally upset that anyone would dare to celebrate my wedding rather than consider the greater picture, as if her vacation were the bigger picture. One of my cousins has had enough. "Let me get things straight. You skipped your own son's brother's wedding in favor of a vacation and a work function, and now you're upset with those who did attend? Make it make sense." Madison ignored this and went right to being the victim. A few minutes later, she shared a dramatic Instagram story, a black and white photo with meaningless drivel like, "Some people forget who's always been there for them, and loyalty isn't what it used to be." Meanwhile, Ethan has sent me a private message. He hadn't spoken much before, but now he admits he didn't expect things to escalate this quickly. He made it sound like he wanted to remain neutral but wasn't sure how. His argument was, "I don't want to get in the middle of it." It was too late. Then my mother made her next move. She changed tactics and went straight for Olivia's phone. The message was lengthy, guilt-inducing, and full of feigned care. According to her, I was ripping the family apart, and Olivia needed to calm me down before it was too late. Olivia glanced over the message, groaned and replied without hesitation, "We're on honeymoon. We're not interested in this drama." She then put down her phone and returned to drinking her martini. People in the group chat continued to argue. While my mother and Madison were furious, a growing number of family members began to object. More photos and videos from the wedding had appeared online, and it was clear how joyful everyone had been, even without my parents, Madison and Ethan. Then Aunt Diane snapped. "You are humiliating yourself. You made your decision. Now deal with them." That's when my father stepped in. Not publicly, of course. He sent me a quiet, half-hearted note. "I regret how things turned out." That was it. There was no meaningful apology. No standing up to my mother or Madison. Just another pointless regret with no action plan. Then Madison learned about the honeymoon. Apparently she assumed we were still at home, most likely dealing with wedding cleaning or whatever else she expected us to be doing. But when she learned we were already on a plane and enjoying beverages on a beach without alerting anybody, she became agitated. The group conversation blew up again. She began yelling about how, "Wow, guess we really mean nothing to you, and you couldn't even tell your own family where you were going." That was enough for me. I sent one final message. "You've all made your decisions. I created mine. Have a good week," I said, muting the chat. Returning home after the honeymoon was like walking into another universe. Olivia and I had spent 3 weeks drinking drinks on the beach, while my family had gone through a downward spiral. The notifications began to arrive as soon as we landed and turned on our phones again. The first indicator of trouble was my mother's Facebook breakdown. She had written a lengthy, impassioned diatribe about how she never dreamed her own child would turn their back on family, and how some people allow strangers to destroy what should have been unbreakable relationships. She didn't mention me by name, but everybody who was familiar with the incident understood who she was referring to. The comments were loaded with distant relatives joining in, some approving, some visibly uncomfortable but attempting to remain impartial. Madison was not far behind. She followed up with a sorrowful photo captioned, "Some bonds aren't as strong as you think." There were no names or outright callouts, but the message was clear. She sought compassion and, of course, received it. Her friends and family members filled the comments with heart emojis and notes saying she deserved more. Then followed the family divide. A cousin contacted me stating that some family believed my parents and Madison were being difficult, while others simply hoped things had turned out differently. It wasn't an all-out fight, but it was evident that some individuals would rather avoid conflict than admit who was wrong. Apparently, some individuals prioritized avoiding controversy above the wedding event. Then my father showed up. I hadn't heard anything from him since the wedding, only his usual indifferent regrets. It was strange to see him outside of our house. He wasn't the type of man who took decisive action. But here he stood, as if he'd realized the harm had been done. He wanted to chat. Inside he paused, evidently uneasy. He eventually stated that he disagreed with what my mother and Madison had done, but he felt compelled to remain silent. He discussed how they had been furious in the weeks preceding up to the wedding, and how they had made it plain that if he tried to push back, there would be consequences for him as well. Olivia sat silently, listening, but I could see she didn't believe it, and neither did I. At this time, it was evident that my father was aware that what was happening was improper, but he had done nothing to prevent it. Now that everything had blown out, he wanted to play the helpless intermediary. Olivia did not hold back. She reminded him that he had let it happen. He stood by and watched while my mother and Madison spun falsehoods, guilt-tripped family members, and boycotted their own son's wedding over absolutely ludicrous reasons. That's when I issued my demand. If he truly supported me and regretted how things had turned out, he needed to express it publicly, as well as to my mother and Madison. Not in a quiet private talk. Not in a whisper that no one else could hear. He needed to stand up for me rather than simply sending meaningless apologies. He immediately backed down. He murmured something about how complex it was and how he didn't want to make it worse. In other words, he was unwilling to take a stance. He preferred to remain in the background and observe everything rather than speak out. That is all I needed to hear. Madison's final move came after he had departed. She sent me a long, insane text about how selfish I was and how I had broken the family's harmony. She went on and on about how I had embarrassed her and how, this is why no one respects you anymore. That was all. I was finished. I blocked her. No more texting, no more passive hostile social media posts, enough of her crap. Gone. Not long later, Ethan reached out. His message was straightforward. I should have done more. I apologize. He did not explain his silence. I did not try to rationalize it, just acknowledged that he had failed to assist me when he should have. At this time, I realized that some family members would never change. My mom and Madison were still sure that they had done nothing wrong. My father was too cowardly to challenge them. But Ethan was beginning to see it. Maybe not enough to stand up to them totally, but enough to recognize he was mistaken. That was enough for me to know Olivia and I were going ahead without them. Months have passed. Following the wedding pandemonium, social media meltdowns, and botched guilt trips, I believed my family had finally accepted reality. I'd moved on. Olivia and I were content with our lives without the frequent turmoil. Then, out of nowhere, the texts began. My mother texted a casual just checking in message. But when I didn't answer right away, she intensified, reminding me of Madison's upcoming wedding and behaving as if I was the one who had to make apologies for all they had done. Madison, who had been radio silent since I blocked her, unexpectedly unblocked me on social media. She didn't send any messages, but she did start admiring old images from years ago, before things broke apart. Olivia noticed right away. She didn't even have to ask. They want something, she explained. Of course she was correct. A few days later, one of my relatives revealed that Madison was getting married. That was the true cause for the unexpected kindness. She didn't reach out because she missed me. She wasn't attempting to repair things. She asked me to attend her wedding. Then the invitation arrived. It wasn't personal. There was no note or apology, just a normal wedding invitation addressed to me and Olivia. Olivia stared at it and then back at me. So, does she expect us to act like nothing happened? Apparently that is precisely what they expected. My mother's texts got extremely nice. Suddenly she was all about family unity and new begins. She cleverly avoided all of the wedding turmoil, appearing as if it were just another typical family gathering. Then Ethan called. He wasn't theatrical, but the message was clear. They wanted me to make things right by coming up. According to him, Madison and my mother saw this as an excellent chance for us to move on from everything. Madison must have felt forced to recognize me since she eventually messaged me directly. For the first time in months, she reached out. Of course, it was not an apology. She was acting like a bigger person. She said she would forgive me if I showed up. That was all I needed to see. I responded simply. I thought you didn't care about inconvenient wedding dates. I then refused the invitation. Mom immediately began phoning. I disregarded the first few. She then left a message with the same guilt-tripping gibberish as previously. I was pulling the family apart. I was acting petty. I was hurting Madison on her most significant day. I did not react. Days later, I began hearing from family. Word had spread. Madison was infuriated. She was telling everyone that I was immature and resentful for missing her wedding. Apparently she was surprised that I would retain a grudge over something so little. Olivia simply chuckled when she heard that. Then she had a fantastic idea. Let's book a trip that weekend. And we did. A luxury resort with everything. We made sure to inform a few cousins, not in a petty way, but casually during conversation. Madison received the news. That is when the calls and messages ceased. Madison and my mother must have known that nothing they said would change my mind. There will be no more false lovely texts, no more frantic attempts to coerce me into going. Then my father grabbed out. A short message. I regret how things turned out. Same as before. The same meaningless regrets with no genuine action. I did not react. At that time, I had all the closure I required. Madison's wedding came and went, and I heard nothing about it. No last-minute requests. There are no last guilt trips. It was as if they had finally understood that I was not going to go. Olivia and I spent the weekend at the beach, blissfully unconcerned. And that's when I understood we were finally free. Madison's wedding week arrived, and Olivia and I couldn't have been more relaxed. We spent the weekend like any other, carefree and unconcerned with the family drama that had dominated the previous several months. Madison had attempted to manipulate the situation, but we had moved on. The wedding weekend passed, and we spent it in complete tranquility. We didn't get caught up in the intensity of the situation. I didn't even check my phone for texts from my family, but the consequences came quickly. One of my cousins contacted me and couldn't stop laughing. Madison had apparently been spreading the missing brother story to the rest of the family. She was telling everyone who would listen that I had refused to support my own sister on her special day. My absence was somehow portrayed as the worst betrayal, and she made it appear as if I was the one hurting the family. It was not only Madison. A few days later, I entered Facebook and saw my mother's message. It was one of those ambiguous dramatic statuses, plainly aimed at me. She bemoaned how some people just can't put the past behind them, and how family should come before petty grudges. It was a classic attempt to guilt-trip me into submission. Ethan sent me a last-minute appeal, stating he regretted things had gone differently and hoped I would rethink attending Madison's wedding. For once, he admitted that our family had handled matters poorly. Nonetheless, he refrained from explicitly criticizing their actions. Olivia, always the voice of reason, informed me that none of them were concerned about my wedding. None of them respected my limits or helped me get through the problem with Madison. She was correct, I owe them nothing. Madison texted me, pretending to be the larger person, just as I thought things were about to calm down. She replied, "It would mean a lot if you came, but I understand if you're still holding a grudge." It was a phony olive branch, but I saw through it. I didn't waste time exchanging niceties. I responded, "You weren't willing to change your plans for my wedding, but I should drop everything for yours." That did not go over well. She flipped immediately. Within minutes she accused me of being selfish and fixated on the past. I was not surprised. It was the usual Madison, constantly attempting to change the script when things didn't go her way. My mother wasn't done either. A few hours later she called, teary and frantic. She said that the family was breaking apart because of me, and that if I didn't fix things, they would never be the same again. I was not buying it. I'd heard this manipulation too many times. I told her plainly, "Madison and the rest of you made your choices, and now I'm making mine." That was the last time I took her calls. Regarding the wedding, I heard bits and pieces from the extended family. There was some little rumor about tension throughout the event, such as Madison repeatedly criticizing my absence and how unjust it was, but I didn't care. Madison had created her bed, now she had to lay in it. Then Ethan sent his message. It was many days later, after the wedding had concluded. He informed me that the wedding had been a fiasco due to all the commotion. The tension was evident, and people were muttering about how family feuds had wrecked everything. But Madison made one final nasty move. She did exactly what I expected. She made an Instagram update. The caption was about being grateful for the real family who showed up and cutting toxic people out of her life. The irony was not lost on anyone. She had cut me off for just setting limits, but now she pretended to be the embodiment of grace. Of course, my father came through with a private confession. He recognized Madison and Mom had gone too far, but he refused to take a public stance. He admitted he hated how things turned out, but was too terrified to speak anything. His cowardice was irritating. He had been silent the entire time, and now he was acting as if he were trapped in the midst. At this moment, I was finished. Olivia and I were not going to waste another second at this circus. We didn't need this turmoil in our life. Instead, we scheduled a lavish meal to celebrate our newfound independence. Madison's wedding was over, and we had come out on top. We weren't concerned about the turmoil. We didn't mind the passive-aggressive posts. What was important was that we were pleased, and nothing they did could take that away. We toasted to our peace, to a life free of poison, to removing individuals who only added drama and manipulation to our lives, and, most importantly, to the future we were creating without the weight of their negativity weighing us down. The family has lost its grip on us. It's been just over a year since Madison's wedding, and I haven't heard anything from my family. I am not surprised. The dust has cleared, and while I have moved on, the effects of the pandemonium are still being felt. Madison's marriage, for one, is going apart quicker than I could have anticipated. Less than a year after the wedding, a cousin informed me that Madison and her new husband were always squabbling. Apparently, it was about economics and competing life objectives, two common concerns that arise when individuals hurry into things. Madison was always concerned with appearances, and I suppose the ideal fairy tale wedding wasn't enough to keep things together. I heard Madison was distraught, but I didn't feel any sympathy. She'd spent months portraying me as the villain in her story, but suddenly the narrative was shifting. Her marriage was not ideal, and no amount of social media filters could alter that. Mom, as predicted, was still pretending that everything was all right. Even if it wasn't. She never recognized my wedding. Not in private, not in public, not even with a half-hearted Facebook comment. She continued the quiet treatment, never sharing any images or acknowledging anything. She refused to acknowledge that the true reason I walked away was because she and Madison had made it hard for me to stay. However, I did observe something odd. My father began loving some of the images I shared of Olivia and me. Shots of us traveling, attending events and simply living our life. At first I assumed it was a coincidence, but no. He liked practically every image and even said, "Good to see you happy." Nonetheless, he never said anything publicly. He never recognized our wedding. It seemed as if he was attempting to offer solidarity without actually being by me in any meaningful sense. Ethan, who had remained relatively impartial throughout, began to exhibit indications of fatigue. He had contacted me a couple times, casually messaging about unrelated topics, old family memories, and mutual friends. Then one day, he simply said it. He confessed that the family's turmoil had affected him. He informed me that he could no longer keep up with the turmoil between Madison, Mom, and Dad. He claimed he was constantly caught in the middle, attempting to mediate while everyone else exacerbated the situation. But Madison's conduct wasn't improving. It was as if she couldn't take being the one left out of everything. I observed a series of hazy postings on her social media about growing up with poisonous people and recognizing who didn't care. It was obvious that she was referring to me. But by this time, I had stopped paying attention to her foolishness. Then the true twist arrived. Olivia and I discovered we were pregnant. It was a watershed moment for us, something we'd been hoping for and working towards. We kept the news to ourselves at first, only telling a few supportive family members who had been there for us during the storm. But, as much as we wanted to enjoy the occasion, I should have anticipated how my mother would respond. She learned from a relative, not from me. When she did, it prompted a breakdown. The first thing she did was contact me saying, "I hope you don't punish your child the way you punished your family." She had the audacity to blame me for not telling her first, as if she was entitled to the knowledge. Olivia had had enough at that time. She blocked my mother and Madison from all social media platforms, unwilling to put up with any more turmoil. I did not blame her. I'd had it with them for a long time, but Olivia was trying to be pleasant to maintain the peace. The ship had sailed. My father sent me a note shortly after. He expressed concern about the family coming apart and asked if we could mend things before the baby arrives. It was the same old pattern. He asked me to simply forgive and forget. To let it all go for the sake of family. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. I made it clear to him that only positive, supporting individuals would be in our child's life. No exclusions. I was not going to allow Madison or Mom get us down anymore. This was a new chapter for Olivia and me, and I wasn't going to let them wreck it as they did everything else. Ethan was finally seeing the light. He gradually distanced himself from Madison and Mom. He stated that he could see how poisonous the situation had become and that he just did not have the stamina to deal with the drama. I could tell he was divided, but he understood deep down that side with Mom and Madison would just perpetuate the turmoil. Then came the final power move. Olivia and I decided to give a large baby shower without inviting my close relatives. It was neither petty nor spiteful. It was just a straightforward, honest depiction of our feelings. We didn't need them to commemorate this milestone. We had friends, extended relatives, and a strong support network that genuinely cared. The shower was everything we hoped for: happy, romantic, and stress-free. The individuals who mattered were present, and that is all that counted. We didn't need Madison's approval or Mom's pretend pity. What is the best part? They had no idea. They weren't even on the guest list, and that seemed like the greatest victory of all. We had moved on, and we intended to continue our journey together without the baggage. It's been more than 3 years since Madison's wedding, and whatever doubts I had about my decision to break connections with my family have vanished. Madison's divorce was finalized last week and the outcome was nearly poetic. Less than 2 years after the wedding, she had created a show of it, and now her marriage had entirely failed. I don't have all the specifics, but I've heard enough via the grapevine to know it was only a matter of time. She hurried into that marriage, like she had with everything else, and the fissures appeared almost immediately. But true to form, my mother attempted to twist the whole situation. Instead of accepting responsibility for her failure, Madison resorted to Facebook to spread the word about how she had been duped by a bad spouse who took advantage of her good heart. She made a lengthy statement about how heartbroken she was for Madison, how unfair everything was, and how this was a lesson in trusting others. Of course, nothing was said about how Madison's actions led to the disaster. My mother couldn't bring herself to accept her role in all of this. Then came Ethan. He sent me a note late one night that was simple yet profound. It was the type of communication I had been hoping for, but did not expect. It read, "You were correct. Mom and Madison are poisonous." That was all. There is no fluff or excuses. Just the facts. I was not even furious. Ethan had spent years pacing the line between us and them, attempting to maintain peace. But now he'd seen it as well, and I could tell he'd had enough. I did not respond straight away. I knew Ethan needed time to process, just as I did. A few days later, my mother delivered her apology. She sent me a lengthy email expressing she was sorry for how things had ended out and how difficult the entire situation had been for her. But as usual, it wasn't a genuine apology. It was more about how she was dealing with the consequences, how difficult it was to lose her kid, and how much she hoped we could all get along. She made care to note how much suffering she'd been in throughout the ordeal, which unsurprisingly, did not include addressing how much she contributed to the disaster. Then the real kicker arrived. A cousin with whom I still maintained some sort of contact reached out to warn me about a family gathering that my mother was preparing. Mom apparently planned a surprise gathering to push me to make apologies. She informed everyone else that she was praying for a miracle that would reunite the family. It was evident that she was trying to put me on the spot and push me to be the bigger person. Olivia had no patience for this, and I couldn't fault her. She firmly stated, "Our child does not need to be around that negativity." No way. I fully agree with her. We'd come so far in creating a tranquil existence, and I wasn't about to allow my mother or Madison drag us back into their toxic drama. There was no way I was going to go into a reunion where I was supposed to be the villain. So I did what I needed to do. I formally blocked my mother, Madison, and everyone else in the family who continued to support their side. It wasn't just social media, I banned them from everything. Texts, emails, and everything. I was not going to play those games anymore. Then my father sent me a final SMS. It was similar to his previous communications in that he expressed sorrow but was still unwilling to openly support me. He just responded, "I wish things had turned out differently, but I understand why you're done." A simple "I get it," but it felt like a cop-out. He never apologized for how he allowed my mother and Madison abuse me, and he never took a public stance. He still wanted peace, but at this time, I couldn't accept it. Madison, of course, was not finished. She messaged me directly on Instagram, asking if we could chat. She informed me she was ready to move on and wanted to re-establish our family relationship. But at this point, I'd had enough. I did not even open the message. I didn't need more of the same old manipulation. She had destroyed her reputation. The smear effort began shortly after. Friends informed me that Madison was telling others that I had split off the family for no apparent reason. It wasn't even unexpected by this time. She'd been portraying me as the villain for so long, I wasn't surprised to learn she was still doing it behind my back. But I didn't care. I knew the truth, and everybody worth having in my life did, as well. Mom and Madison eventually stopped attempting to reach out. It wasn't because they had a profound realization or were suddenly overcome with sorrow. It was because they recognized I was not going to give up. I was not going to let them drag me back into their world of deception and guilt. They stopped sending messages and appearing to care, and that's when I actually felt free. Olivia and I were doing better than ever. Our baby arrived, and it was all we could have asked for. We were surrounded by individuals who genuinely cared about us, who respected our limits, and unconditionally supported us. Our little one was surrounded by love, and I couldn't have hoped for anything better. Ethan, too, started to pull away from Madison and Mom. Over time he realized what I had always known. The only path ahead was without them. I'm not sure he'll ever publicly confront them, but I'm confident he sees what I've seen. Looking back, cutting them off was the finest move I've ever done. It was not easy, but it was essential. I constructed a new life, a better life, and I'm grateful to everyone who helped me along the way. The rest of the family can continue with their current activities. But as far as I am concerned, I have won. I choose serenity. I decided on Olivia. And I selected my child.
But
Why did they get mad at?
Because I said they're good to fuck on. And I meant it. I thought they'd like that.
Why wouldn't they like that?
I said there's a few things you could do, people do on mattresses. Die, sleep, and fuck. And these, I don't know if they're good to die on.
People have to understand, and I hope people listening that run these companies will actually pay attention to what we're talking about here. The people that are listening to your show don't care about that and also buy mattresses. But they listen to that kind of talk all the time.
Yeah, man.
That's why they listen to the show. So if you want those people, just do it that way.
Why?
Don't be silly. It's not a stain on your company because a crazy man says they're good to fuck on.
Which they are. And that's a by the way, to me that is Like, let's cut to brass tacks when it comes to mattresses.
Right.
We're not fucking on the floor.
Right.
Like, and so if it was bouncy to
Are you ashamed? Are you ashamed
you
that
think
you
people
fuck?
aren't fucking on your mattress? Do you have a no fuck on this mattress rule? Who are you that you don't?
Is it like don't ask, don't tell?
I guess for them it was.
Yeah.
I guess they didn't want to. They just think everyone's laying on these things to sleep.
Yeah, we just sleep.
But yeah, they were just.
We fuck in the shower.
I wrote them an email just saying, like, guys, I'm absolutely flabbergasted that you think people aren't fucking on your mattresses, and it just seems odd to me that was one of my favorite cancellations for a commercial ever.
Ari's lost a ton.
I bet. I would love to know all the ones he's lost.
I don't want to speak out of school when he comes on. I'll have him like list them off, all the ones that he's lost for these fucking insane commercials that he used to do. But it's the same deal. It's like, that's what I like. And guess what? Who the fuck is listening to Ari Shaffir? People who love Ari Shaffir,
right,
which want to hear that kind of a commercial. If you
right,
want to actually sell your product to an Ari Shaffir fan,
yeah,
let him say whatever the fuck he wants.
Yeah.
Let him say whatever the fuck he wants. Just make him have a disclaimer. DraftKings did not write this.
Right.
That's it. Just let him say whatever the fuck he wants.
That's what I will say. I will always say, they didn't tell me to say this.
Perfect.
But
then they're off the hook. They should shut the fuck up.
Most people are cool with it. Like, it's very rare these days that happens. But every once in a while, I will get a note that someone's mad at me for something I said, and it's never something negative. But I mean, dude, do you like? It's so weird to me that this is our jobs.
Oh, bro, do you remember when we first started?
Yeah. It
was for nothing. No one made any money. We just had a couch. I had a couch and some microphones.
It was so pure.
It was, the whole thing is still kind of pure, if you really think about it. Like, as something that's mass consumed, this is about as, like, pure as you can get.
That, for sure. And you've gotten in trouble for that. You know, like, a lot of people, unfortunately, I don't blame anybody these days. A lot of people have kids. People feel like they have to be very careful what you say these days because of, like, social rejection and stuff like that. But there was a time where that wasn't on your mind at all. You didn't think anybody was going to listen. Like, this shit was like completely strange underground tech that we were, and also I really loved the just doing it just for doing its sake. You know what I mean? Now,
exactly.